Dobrodošli, ja sam Azra Hadžić. Ove nedjelje izdvajamo sljedeće priče. Zašto je sve manje kršćana u Svetoj zemlji? Zašto milioni pripadnika Evangeličke crkve u SAD-u podržavaju Izrael i kako na to gledaju palestinski kršćani? Donosimo i priču iz sukobima zahvaćenog Sudana. Naša reporterka prenosi iskustvo izvještavanja. Strašno je vidjeti državu s tako velikim potencijalom svedenu na ovaj nivo. Ljudi koji su zarobljeni u Kartumu nemaju novca i moraju se snalaziti bez vode i struje. Nemaju dovoljno ni drugih potrepština, samo žele da prestane pucati, kaže naša reporterka Hiba Morgan koja izvještava iz Sudana i dodaje, kad me ne budete vidjeli na ekranu, tad se trebate zabrinuti.
It's shocking to see fighter jets flying overhead, to hear the sound of artillery. It's shocking to have to leave your home, not knowing when you're going to come back and if it's safe, if it will ever get safe. I'm Hiba Morgan, Al Jazeera's correspondent in Sudan, and between us, the power struggle between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese army has been devastating to millions, including my own family. When this fighting started, I came to the office, and as I was entering the gate of the building, we heard the shots around the presidential palace. Yep, you can hear that. That's the sound of the gunfire just around us here in the capital, Khartoum, not far from the president.
If you need to go and take cover, let's not keep you exposed.
No, we will be all right. I guess when I disappear from the screen, that's when you should be concerned. Sometimes we had to get to the basement because that's the safest place in the building. There was always a question of when is it going to be safe to go out, because we were told that the high buildings around the central parts of Khartoum had snipers.
Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his deputy Mohammed Hamdan Daglo, who leads the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, had been in charge of the country since 2019, but they disagree on how to restore civilian rule.
It's a power struggle between two army generals, with civilians caught up in the middle. It's a power struggle for Sudan's resources, for Sudan's wealth, for the highest seat in the country. I was born in Sudan and lived in various parts of the world, but eventually settled back home with my mom and my family. My family had to leave the home that my mother and I built. I'm not sure when we're going to be able to come back. It makes me feel heartbroken because I know she didn't want to leave. It wasn't just a place where she put her head at night. It wasn't just a place where we gathered as a family. For her, it was a project of a lifetime. I didn't get the chance to say goodbye. I'm not sure when I'm going to see them again. They're effectively displaced. The people who are trapped in Khartoum, in addition to lacking the cash, they have to deal with lack of running water, they have to deal with lack of electricity, they have to deal with scarcity in commodities, and the prices keep increasing. They no longer want electricity. They think that's a luxury, that to even think of it at the moment. They just want water and, if possible, the sound of gunshots to stop. When we first heard about the ceasefire the first time, we thought it was going to hold because it was only a period of 3 hours. That did not happen. We could still hear the artillery strikes. And so the second time and third time, we were less optimistic. The fourth time, we knew that evacuations were happening, so we were a little bit more optimistic because we knew that the two sides, no matter how brutal they are, they don't want to affect the foreigners. They want to have and cultivate foreign relations once they rule. People have been trying to get medical attention and they can't. Hospitals have been bombed. And to show that you're willing to hold a ceasefire just to let the foreigners out shows how much regard you have for the people in your country. When you look at the general command of the army, where there's been a lot of fighting, just about 4 years ago, people were rallying up around the general command, demanding that the army overthrow former President Omar al-Bashir, and they did that. Seeing this happening and unfolding right before my eyes, in a place where just 4 years ago was so full of hope and so much spirit, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because the youth, instead of having to focus on their future and trying to build up a country, are now trying to pick up the pieces, the rubbles, trying to pick up the dead ones on the street and trying to help people leave the country as opposed to trying to get people back to try to build this country. For a country that has so much potential, to see it come down to this level is devastating.
Palestinski kršćani već desetljećima nestaju iz Svete zemlje, iako je s tog područja počelo širenje kršćanstva. Reporterka Al Jazeere Plus Dena Takruri je u Betlehemu provjerila zašto se to događa. Jedna kršćanska porodica govori o apsurdnim i teškim situacijama s kojima se suočavaju, dok duže od 30 godina brane pravo na svoju zemlju. Kažu, i Isus je svjedočio mnogim nepravdama. Mi odbijamo mrziti, ali to ne znači da prihvatamo loše stvari koje nam ljudi ovdje rade. Vjerujemo u pravdu.
I'm in Bethlehem, the city believed to be the birthplace of Jesus.
But because Bethlehem is a Palestinian city in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, it's surrounded today by a massive concrete wall, military checkpoints, and illegal settlements.
It's imposing a system of control that I'm sure Jesus was very familiar of. If he's born today, he would be born on our side of the wall.
Over the decades, the percentage of Christians living in Bethlehem and the occupied Palestinian territories has plummeted, rendering them practically invisible.
Did you know there were Palestinian Christians before coming here?
No, I didn't.
مسيحية طلعت من هون يعني المفروض هو يكونوا أوعى من هيك.
So what happened to all the Christians?
To find out, I'm here to ask the Palestinian Christians that remain.
It's a big issue for us that one day the Holy Land will become without Christians.
This is the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, one of the holiest sites in Christianity. This spot right here is believed to be exactly where Jesus was born. But down the street at a different church, I'm attending a Sunday service led by Palestinian pastor Munzir Ishaq. He says every year there are fewer Palestinian Christians in his congregation.
In our church, there's a lot of old people whose children live outside, and it makes me worry a lot about 20, 30 years from now. Will there be Christians in Palestine? That's really our biggest nightmare.
Around the year 1900, Christians made up about 11% of the population of what was historically called Palestine. That's now down to less than 2% in all of Israel and the occupied territories. The decline is much more pronounced here in Bethlehem. 70 years ago, the area was 80% Christian. Today, that number is only 12%.
Why are the numbers of Christians specifically dwindling here?
Like all Palestinians, we live under Israeli reality, Israeli oppression. Here in the West Bank, in Bethlehem, we live under the Israeli military occupation, where we suffer from restrictions of movements, very limited opportunities economically. Overall, the quality of life here is very difficult. This used to be the main road in Bethlehem. And then the wall cut really in the middle of the road. And what used to be one of the liveliest streets or roads in Bethlehem is now this dead area as a result. To us, Jesus was one of our own. We look at him as a Palestinian Jew. He was born here. And I think even if he's born today, he would be born on our side of the wall, because Jesus was born under the occupation, under the Roman Empire.
Israel began building the wall here in Bethlehem in 2002 in what it says was an attempt to stop Palestinian attackers from entering its territory. But rather than building the wall on the boundary between Israel and the West Bank, it was built deep inside the occupied Palestinian territories. That left massive areas of Palestinian land inaccessible to their owners on one side of the wall, while keeping Palestinians confined on the other side. While walking through Bethlehem, I spoke with Samir Lolas, who crafts and sells souvenirs made from olive wood. The wall is just a few feet away from the front door of his shop.
مشكلة على بيت لحم كبيرة. أنا كان المحل يسوى مصاري. كان شغل كويس. كيف بدي أقول لك؟ كيف اللي حاطين على كلب الواحد صخرة مش قادر. يعني هذا على قلوبنا صخرة. هذا مفروض يمكن يعني مش مفروض يضل.
The wall cuts off access to most of Bethlehem's farmland, and in the north, it completely blocks off the route to Jerusalem, another city Christians consider holy, which is just over 5 miles away.
It makes us wonder whether if Jesus was here today and wants to go to Jerusalem, would he need a permit to go to Jerusalem?
Because you do. Everybody here does, right?
Everybody here does.
Israel has imposed this permit system on Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza since 1993. To leave those territories, even if it's to worship at Jerusalem's holy sites, Palestinians have to apply for Israeli permits that are often rejected. In 2022, many local Christians were banned from attending Easter celebrations at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus is believed to have been buried.
It was very upsetting to see, as a Christian, that I and others like me can't go to one of our important ceremonies in Easter, the most important ceremony. This is, of course, part of a much larger violation of Palestinian Christians' right to religion.
Because like other Palestinians, Christians have faced violence and attacks from the Israeli state and settlers alike. One shocking recent example of an attack on Christians at the hands of Israel was this. In May 2022, Israeli forces attacked the funeral procession of Palestinian Christian and renowned Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. She was shot in the head by an Israeli soldier while reporting in a helmet and flak jacket clearly marked as press.
It was extremely upsetting. Even just her funeral, it was under attack. It was probably one of the biggest events that I've seen in my lifetime, where you see both the Palestinian struggle and Christian symbolisms sort of in one place. There were both Muslims and Christians praying together. Often there's this desire and interest to see Palestinians split on the basis of religion, and by the West also a narrative where Muslims are persecuting Christians, but here we saw all Palestinians coming together.
You know, a lot of time when visitors come, they ask me, how is your relationship with your Muslim neighbors? And I simply ask, well, they're our classmates, they're our business partners, they're our neighbors, literally.
Mundir is also the director of the Christ at the Checkpoint Conference, which aims to teach Christians who visit Bethlehem from around the world about the realities of the occupation.
Prior to coming here, did you know that Palestinian Christians even exist?
Not really, no. I thought they were mostly Muslim.
What are your impressions of the West Bank and specifically the occupation?
It's insane to me, honestly. I didn't really know much about it coming here, which is I'm kind of ashamed of, but it really struck me because I just have never really seen people live like this before.
Meeting us actually opens their mind to a different narrative, opens their mind to the fact that maybe we did get it wrong about Palestine and Israel. And it is through a big misconception that this is a conflict between Jews and Muslims, as if we're caught in the middle, because not only we're part of the Palestinian people, but we're part of the Palestinian movement for liberation.
Palestinian Christians were among the earliest and most fervent opponents of British colonial rule in Palestine, and were early leaders in fighting against the displacement of Palestinians to make room for a Jewish state. And that fight continues on today with people like the Nassar family.
We're on our way to visit the Nassar family who we met at church yesterday. They own a 100-acre farm south of Bethlehem that the family has had for over a century, and it's currently surrounded by illegal Israeli settlements.
Here we are in the center of 5 Israeli settlements.
There's one right there.
There's one
We're
there.
looking at it.
You can see that all hilltops around us are already Israeli settlements existing, except of this hilltop. And so we are the only hilltop in this area that is without an Israeli settlement.
Dawood's grandfather purchased this land, now dubbed Tent of Nations, in 1916, a full 32 years before the creation of Israel. But now Israel says it owns the land and wants to build Jewish settlements on the Nassar family's farm. The family is fighting to stay on the land, but it's not easy.
إنه ممنوع نبني، ممنوع يكون عندنا مي، ممنوع كهرباء. معظم الوقت إذا بدنا نيجي ونروح نرجع من الأرض ونيجي على الأرض، مرات بتكون في check points.
How does your Christian faith inform how you resist this occupation?
Jesus also saw a lot of, like injustices happening. We refuse to hate, but that doesn't mean to accept the bad actions that people are doing against us. We are people who believe in justice.
Dawood's family has been defending their land in the Israeli courts for over 30 years.
I think, when you're talking, people might not realize you're a Palestinian family on Palestinian land, and Israel's trying to take your land, and the only recourse you have is to resort to an Israeli military court. It's like the cards are stacked against you, it sounds.
Of course, we know that this is unjust, and we are under occupation. For us, this is the only way to try to protect, keep knocking at the door of justice,
In the meantime, Dawood says that most of the other Christian families in the nearby village of Nahalin have left after being pushed out by settlements and blocked off by the wall.
You feel that we are the only hope for the village to exist. So our mission to protect the land is not just about protecting the private property, but it is the hope for many people. We ask you to bless our community here and to bless the food.
The farm hosts summer camps and activities for the local Palestinian community. It also hosts international volunteers. Thousands have come over the years and have more freedom of movement than the Nassar family themselves.
يعني أنا دائما عدة مرات بحكي للجروبات يا ريتني إنه أنا أروح معكم في الباص وتلففوا لنا لأنه مزبوط إحنا ما بنعرف جوا. إحنا ما بنعرف بالضبط من القدس وللشمال يعني ما بنعرف البلد منيح. إذا أنت حطيتيني في القدس أنا ما بعرف بضيع.
احكي لي ليش أنتوا وجودكم كعائلة مسيحية مهمة كتير هون؟
مش عارف عمريش فكرت إنه أنا أنا بفكر إنه أنا فلسطيني وخلاص يعني بس بجوز إنه إحنا واحدة عائلة واحدة من قلائل عيال مسيحية إنه عندهم أرض ولساتهم موجودين بأرضهم مع إنه يعني كتير فلسطينية بمروا في نفس المشاكل يعني مشاكلنا نفس أي مشكلة لأي فلسطيني.
U narednim minutama pogledajte i drugi dio priče reporterke Al Jazeera Plus u kojoj analizira zašto za milione evangeličkih kršćana u SAD-u podrška Izraelu predstavlja dio njihove vjere, kako mogu podržavati one koji progone pripadnike Evangeličke crkve u Palestini, te kako na to gledaju palestinski kršćani.
Israel is God's chosen people, always have been God's chosen people, always will be God's chosen people.
In my last video, I walked through Bethlehem's walled-off streets and met Palestinian Christians fighting to stay on their land. But I kept thinking about how some of Israel's biggest supporters back home are not necessarily American Jews, but evangelical Christians.
Most Christians will tell you, well, we love Israel because God says, I will bless those who bless my people.
So why do American evangelicals support a state that directly hurts Palestinians, including their fellow Christians?
You have my sisters and brothers who are supposed to be my support, actually doing all their best to support the ones who are oppressing us. And it makes me angry.
Here's something that might surprise you. White evangelical Christians in the U.S. are more than twice as likely as American Jews to believe that God gave Israel to the Jewish people. Now, not all evangelicals believe this, but the ones that do, their voices are often the loudest and most influential.
The title deed to the land of Israel is recorded in the Bible, which gives the Jewish people a clear and unclouded title to that land forever. It belongs to them, and it belongs to them only.
People that share this view are called Christian Zionists. They believe the Bible commands them to support and defend the modern-day state of Israel, regardless of what this means for the Palestinians who live under its occupation. They point to one biblical verse in particular, Genesis 12:3, that they believe references the modern state of Israel.
Genesis 12, here it is in the very beginning of the Bible. You know, I'll bless and I'll curse those who curse her.
I met Sharon Sanders in Jerusalem. She's an American Christian who moved here from Illinois in the 1980s out of a deep religious sense of mission to support Israel. She and her husband founded the charity Christian Friends of Israel, which aims to help people from recent Jewish immigrants to Israeli soldiers.
Just simply kindness of the heart to say thank you for protecting us, thank you for taking care of the land.
Her charity is one of several foreign Christian-led organizations that have flourished in Israel in recent years.
It's estimated that every year evangelicals give around $200 million to Israel. Worldwide donations from the Jewish community far surpass that, but Christian contributions continue to rise and show no signs of slowing down.
And some organizations specifically raise money for Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, which are illegal under international law.
We're talking about millions of dollars and political support that is used to continue my oppression.
When you support a specific state who has racist policies and is enforcing an apartheid state, that would be unbiblical in my mind, right? That wouldn't be loving thy neighbor as yourself.
You know, we read the same Bible, but then they are using the Bible as a weapon against me. You know, we Christians call the Bible Injil, the good news. So they've turned the good news into our nightmare.
Why is their read of the Bible so different?
Evangelicals read the Bible in a very literal and simple way. They believe that you have to bless Israel so that God blesses you. So it's like Israel becomes a gauge of whether you receive blessing from God. You know, makes me wonder what kind of God they are meeting in the Bible. The God I meet in the Bible is a God of love, is a God of peace. They see in it an image of God who's a tribal God who favors one nation over everyone else based on a promise that's thousands of years old.
But for Christian Zionists like Sharon, that promise is prophecy. Many believe that the establishment of Israel in 1948, which displaced the majority of the Palestinians who lived there, was all part of God's divine plan.
We see all over God's word that the Jewish people at a certain point in history would begin to find their way back home. And we know that happened in May 1948 when the state became a real nation. And ever since then, the Jewish people have been coming home. It's a miracle, and we've been living in Bible prophecy ever since.
Do you think Jesus, who preached love thy neighbor, would be okay seeing a wall dividing people like that and cutting off people from their land?
He probably would have quoted Genesis 12:3 and said, I'll bless those who bless my people.
When you're talking, I feel like there's a lot of support and elevation of the Jewish people having Israel. But doesn't that contradict the principles of equality that Christianity preaches?
Well, then I think we'd have to go back to God and ask him why he chose the Jewish people. He chose them to be a light to the nations, according to his word. He chose them to bring the Messiah through. I think the key is study what God says, not what man says.
To be clear, not all American Christians read the Bible like this. In fact, in the last few years, several prominent U.S. churches have come out in support of Palestinian rights, even endorsing the Palestinian boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement targeting Israel. But even so, the people who do believe in this prophecy have a huge following. And for them, it all culminates into a biblical grand finale called the end times.
Somebody said, I want to understand the end times, where you just need to look at three things. You look at Jesus, you look at the Jews, and you look at Jerusalem.
Many evangelicals believe that once Jews fully control the land, Jesus will return to earth and rapture Christians up to heaven.
To believers, it's going to be a time of ecstasy and joy and excitement and glory. But to those who do not know him, it's going to be a day of judgment.
If you're a Christian, you will not be around for the tribulation period. You'll be safely in heaven.
And this tribulation period, some believe, is a violent and bloody war for those who remain behind.
Jesus Christ will speak the word, and he will summon in the most dramatic act of warfare in human history. He will bring about the slaughter of those who reject him.
And in some interpretations, they believe that 2/3 of the Jews will die. So these Christian Zionists, not all of them believe this specific theology, but many of them do. You're promoting them to come to a specific location in order for them, or 2/3 of them, to die.
It doesn't sound like a holy alliance.
It doesn't.
But this alliance is powerful.
Millions of Christians in America and around the world now stand with Israel.
Okay, pause. We're going to come back to Sharon, John, and Munvir in a bit. But first, let me tell you a bit more about this guy. Because to understand how influential Christian Zionists have become, you have to understand John Hagee. This Texas pastor is the founder and leader of Christians United for Israel, or CUFI, an organization that claims to have 10 million members. That makes Hagee influential outside the movement too, with lots of big-name friends in politics. Even though in several sermons, Hagee had claimed that Hitler was actually sent by God to force Jews to move to Israel.
Then God sent a hunter. A hunter is someone who comes with a gun and he forces you. Hitler was a hunter. Why did it happen? Because God said, my top priority for the Jewish people is to get them to come back to the land of Israel.
Wild, right? If that sounds cynical to you, well, it actually underpins Hagee's beliefs when it comes to Israel. For example, this dedication to protecting and defending Israel includes denying the internationally acknowledged fact that the West Bank and East Jerusalem are occupied territories. As we saw earlier, Hagee and many of his counterparts insist the Holy Land is actually promised to Jews by God. And so they want to see the West Bank remain under Israel's control, because it's a necessary step for Jesus Christ's return to earth. But neither the Hitler comments nor his viewpoint on the apocalypse have made Hagee a political pariah. Even Israeli leaders applaud and court the support of Hagee's movement.
Now there millions and millions of devout Christians who stand with Israel. So I want to thank you on behalf of all the people of Israel.
One group that is less welcome at the Kufi conference is journalists. We sent a producer and cameraman to meet some of the attendees at the 2022 conference, but before they could speak to anyone, they were kicked out by security. Still, I wanted to know, why do so many Christians support the ongoing oppression of Palestinians?
I attended a church service in Bethlehem, and I interviewed a pastor there who's really upset at American evangelical Christians for supporting Israel. What would you say to someone like him who's upset with you?
Well, I'm sorry for that, but I've also lived here, and I also have seen why sometimes the rules have to be strong.
Why?
To prevent terrorism, to prevent death. You know, if you have to build a wall, if you have to build a fence, if you have to do whatever it takes to keep those who want to harm you or hurt you, then you do that to save life.
Sharon's thoughts mirror the Israeli government's position, but in reality, the International Court of Justice has asked Israel to tear down that wall because it goes so deep into Palestinian territory, a land grab.
So I'll say that Christian Zionism in general is a very colonial way of reading the Bible and also a very white supremacist type of viewing of the Bible.
It becomes easier to oppress the bad ones because they deserve it, because they brought it upon themselves. We can build a wall and lock them on the other side because they are the ones who are enemies of democracy and freedom, whereas ironically all we're asking for is our freedom.
And for the Palestinian Christians who would say to you, we are actively being oppressed by the state of Israel, we're persecuted here, what do you say to them?
I would say, take a look at the scriptures and love them and be a blessing in any way you can, even if you're being persecuted. What did Jesus say? He said, turn the cheek.
Do you think they should love their oppressor?
I don't believe that Israel is oppressing them.
The injustices Palestinians are suffering under Israeli military rule are impossible to deny. I witnessed and experienced many of them firsthand while reporting this series in the West Bank. There's some hope things are changing back home. Recent polling suggests that young American evangelicals are more supportive of Palestinians than older generations. But so long as this powerful alliance between Christian Zionists and Israel endures, the hope of justice prevailing in the Holy Land remains elusive.
Toliko u ovo sedmičnom izdanju Al Jazeera Svijeta. Doviđenja.